Hi, I'm Tara Lynn of Geek Saga Entertainment here with my co-host Manny for our March 2025 State of the Saga discussion.
And I'm Manny, and in these monthly update shows, we'll be talking about what we've been listening to, playing, reading, and or watching, and probably also just general stuff that's going on with our lives and maybe even recent pop culture happenings.
Before we get started, just a heads up that you can follow me and therefore all of the Geek Saga endeavors at a Geek Saga on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube.
And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Manissimo Art.
Just a couple other house cleaning items before we dig in. First, thank you to any patrons who are joining us live for this patron-only live stream version of this month's State of the Saga. Second, thank you also to any patrons watching the early release of the live stream recording. You guys are such a big part of helping us keep the lights on, so to speak, for Geek Saga Entertainment. And we truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you and the support you give. Finally, if you're watching or listening to this recording once it's gone public, pretty please make sure to hit those like and or subscribe buttons. And if you're catching it somewhere where you can give us a rating, it would really help us out if you could mark us 5 stars. Also, if you aren't already part of our Patreon family, please check out our sponsorship options. For just $5 a month, you can watch these brand new State of the Saga episodes live. While for just $3 a month, you get early access to these episodes and all of our podcast episodes. There's some other perks involved right now. I'm also going to be updating the tiers pretty soon because of this webcast being such a new thing. So check it out at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment.
With all that out of the way, we're going to get into our discussion. We are going to kick this month's episode off with, what are you listening to?
I think you're listening to more stuff than I am, really. I don't know why, but for 3 years now, maybe a little less, maybe 2, I rarely listen to music, even when I'm driving. To be fair, I do not drive very often, right? The amount of driving I do is like going to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks once a week, or going to Taekwondo classes a couple times a week, which I haven't been able to do lately post-surgery. And even when I'm running like a half marathon or a 5K or a 10K, an actual race, I will absolutely listen to music because I want to keep up my pace. But when I'm running around the neighborhood, I like to just listen to podcasts. So lately, I would say the ones I'm listening to the most are Girls Next Level and Truest Blood. Now, the latter it should be self-explanatory. It's a True Blood podcast. It's actually the official one through HBO. It's got Deborah Ann Wool and, oh my gosh, Kristen, I'm blanking on her last name. The actors who played Pam in True Blood. And I had never watched True Blood until I started watching it late last summer, I think. And I was like quickly obsessed. So I finished watching the show, immediately watched it entirely all over again. I'm not getting ahead of myself because I'm not going to go into details about stuff that I did months ago. Then I read the books. I read all of the books that the show is based on, which there's like 13 of them. Some of them I read in like a day. They're just very, very quick, easy reads. And then I was like, now what? So I started listening to Truest Blood. And it is really cool because they have a lot of the really big name actors. And Alan Ball, I think, was a guest on one episode early on in the podcast and everything. So it's also one that's nice because it's like, I don't feel like I have to pay attention. Like if I zone out for a bit, I'm not missing anything big. Now, Girls Next Level, I've been listening to this podcast for a little over a year, I think. It is hosted by Holly Madison and Bridget Marquardt. They were 2 of the 3 girls next door from the E! Show. It was really about them as Hugh Hefner's girlfriends. I'm trying to get away from calling shows like that guilty pleasures. Back when I watched it, I think it aired like 2005 or 2006 to 2008 or so, maybe. I might be off a year or so. It was like 5 seasons. And when I was watching it while it aired, I definitely called it a guilty pleasure. But now I look back and I'm kind of like, listen, I was intrigued. I saw something. There's like, look at these 3 beautiful women, 2 of whom at least are very intelligent. One of them acted kind of ditzy, but I think was smarter than she acted too. So anyway, that show's been over for a while. I hadn't thought about it in God knows how long, years and years and years and years. I want to say Holly Madison, one of her books, the audiobook, was a freebie on Spotify. So I listened to that and I was like, wonder what she's up to these days. And it turns out they had kind of not that long ago started this podcast. So anyway, this is the longest not story short. But what is great about it is that the show was very saccharine sweet. You know what I mean? Like it only showed the fun, pretty side of things. And listening to Holly Madison's books showed that, not shockingly, there was a lot of shit going on in the background. Not necessarily Girls Next Door era, but like in her relationship and prior to that, the first few years she lived at the mansion before the show existed. So yeah, it's been a really interesting trip down memory lane, like trying to remember these episodes that they're talking about, but also they're just really great to listen to. It's nice to see how they've grown and changed as people too, because like I'm actually, I want to say a little bit younger than Holly, maybe by like a year or two. And Bridget is a little bit older than that. She's like, I want to say she just turned 50. So, but they were still like my age-ish at the time the show was airing. So I don't know. It's just been really nice, like listening to their stories, the things they remember, but also like the way they've grown and changed as people. It's been very enlightening and they're very fun and funny. So I don't know if anybody listening to this or watching it later has watched Girls Next Door. I do highly suggest their podcast. It's a good fun. Music wise, I basically just listen to Chappell Roan and once in a while Taylor Swift these days. So,
well, podcasts, when you go on really long drives, it's always better to listen to podcasts or like if I'm working out, I'm going to do podcasts because songs have a time limit on them. So it's like you're driving and you're like, wow, I just listened to this whole album on this 12-hour drive. So I know 40 minutes just passed. Right. So it's like it kind of burns into your brain. But when you get behind like a really good podcast that lasts, an hour, a few hours, you don't think about the time because it's like you're in the middle of a conversation the whole time, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, that's how I got into podcasts in the first place. Was there was a period of time in like 2017, 2018 where I was driving back and forth between Florida and South Carolina a lot. And to be honest, back then I basically listened to just NPR podcasts. But now it's like for my runs, I need something fun-ish when I'm running at least, not like a serious state of the world discussion. And also right now I see enough of the state of the world. I don't need to also be listening to it while I'm trying to get some exercise and feel better about life.
Yeah, no, exactly, man. I always pick weird ones when I'm traveling. I always listen to ones that are like about aliens or something that I wouldn't sit down and listen to. It's just because it's like I want my brain to just kind of see what happens here and just kind of flow with it. That's really only when I'm kind of like driving and stuff. Listening to, I generally, I'm very much like one of the lo-fi hip hop, chill hop kind of people. Cyberwave people, like I like listening to that stuff. That's what's on my headphones literally for the 11 hours that I'm working per day. It's just that because it's the only thing that kind of keeps me focused. Unless I'm angry, then I'll listen to some harder stuff. But for just kind of like keeping my cool and stuff, I listen to a lot of that. I've been pounding down, the two K-pop bands that I love, aespa and ITZY. I've been, they both released new albums recently, so I've been listening to those like crazy because they're a lot of fun. They're like my two favorites right now. Yeah,
I need to listen to more K-pop. The stuff that's been popular on the radio. Obviously, I've heard, I've liked a lot of that music. So many of my friends are super into it. And outside of the ones that are on the radio, the only time I ever end up listening to it is at like late night dance parties at conventions. And I barely go to conventions anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I've always enjoyed listening to it. There's tons of bops, even the ones that aren't well known. So
there are, and that's, I got into it just like through a friend and they're, oh yeah, check this band out. And there was this one song and I just fell in love with it. And then from there, it's like, once I find a band and I like them, like I have to listen to everything that they've ever done. I did all that. And then I discovered the other band. And then it was just like, forget it. It was nonstop. I went to my first K-pop concert back in February in Orlando. It was off the chain. It was awesome. It was about as wild as you can think of it. It's what you would imagine K-pop is. Like, that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. But it was really cool. And the concert environment was really nice. And everybody there is handing out little goodies for everybody. It was like being at a convention. And it was like really neat. But yeah, that's pretty much been the extent of anything that I've been listening to. I actually listened to I wasn't listening, but I was like watching it. And it was that guy, I forgot what his name is, Theo something. He's really popular. He's a podcaster. And there was this girl that was talking about Pornhub, how messed up it was. It dealt with trafficking and all this kind of crazy stuff that I was like, wow, that was insane. Those are the kind of things that I'll listen to on a long trip, stuff like that. I want like informative stuff. So those are the kind of things that I'm into with that. But aside from that, man, really, it's just chill hop. 11 hours a day, pretty much.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I started my genre lit podcast back in 2020, Sagas and Sass, which we've been on like an almost year-long break because it's a lot more work than this one ever is. Writing up book summaries and after reading the books, and it's a lot more work. So it's kind of been on this extended hiatus. But when I first started it, my co-host, our first episode was pretty long, 90 minutes, maybe almost 2 hours. They were like, "This was really long. Are we going to keep doing them this long? Do people actually listen to podcasts this long?" And I was like, yeah. Some of the most popular at that point, the one that popped into my brain was ASWAF, Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones podcast. I was like, most of the really popular ones of those are like 2 to 3 hours per episode. We'll be fine, guys. They're good for long drives. That's exactly.
And when you look at a lot of the more successful podcasts, they're 3 hours because it's a conversation. So it makes those interesting. That's like, I like the informative stuff, but I definitely like when it's a back and forth kind of thing. And I can do that for hours. Depending on who it is, I can do it for hours.
Well, I think this next category is more you than me. What have you been playing recently?
Oh my God. So I'm juggling 3 games right now. A few weeks ago, I went to this like kind of retro video game store, and they had one of these little Super Nintendo Classics things. If you don't know what that is, it's like they re-released. I got the original Nintendo one back in the day, and then the Super Nintendo one I never had, but because they don't put like certain games that I want on them, but I learned how to crack them now. So that way I can put whatever game I want on it. So I have like Sailor Moon games that were only released in Japan on this thing now, these little fighting games and stuff like that. And one of the games that I've been wanting to play for a long time was a game that's really, really dear to me. I played it when I was like 20. It was called Chrono Trigger, and it deals with time travel, and it's a role-playing game. It was done by the same production company that does Final Fantasy. So I was like, well, next time I find one of these things, I'm just going to load this game on it. And lo and behold, I went and I found one, and I did it, and I just started playing it. And then like a week later, the Suikoden Part 1 and Part 2 remaster came out. And that was a game that I was like in love with back in like the mid 90s when the first one came out. I love it because I love the story, right? Because the story is actually based on Chinese folklore. It's called The Water Margin. And it's about 108 heroes, ragtag group of people who like overthrow their respective tyrannical governments. And it's really just like a ragtag band of brothers. They have nothing and they're going. It's a David and Goliath type of story, but it is folklore based off of that time period in like China, you know, the romancing of the 3 kingdoms, all the feudal wars and all that kind of stuff. So it's loosely kind of based on that, but it's really cool and it's really touching actually. Like a lot of the story I think that when our parents would watch me play like these role-playing games, they're like, oh my gosh, you're just melting your brain away. And it's like, no, these stories are completely epic and they make me laugh and they make me cry. And the storytelling on some of the role-playing games, I don't feel is like as strong as it was back then. I'll chalk it up to maybe I was just younger and less jaded. Okay, let's just at least give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But those games there was really cool. And then I picked up this other game that's called Stellar Blade. It's the best way to describe it. It's like it's a Nier Automata knockoff is what it was. Really, it's more of a love letter to it. It's easy to say, well, they just ripped off this other game, but you can really tell that there was a lot of love put into it and a lot of respect towards what their influence was. So it's a lot of thick thighs and boobs and stuff like that kind of. It's sexualized, but it's still like a really good game and it does have a lot of heart. And that game has devoured a bunch of my time. So I mean, that's pretty much it, man. Like I'll play these games pretty hardcore and then I don't play for a while and then I pick them up again. That's why I don't think I haven't finished a game and I don't know how long, because I pick them up, I play them for 10 hours, 20 hours. The last one I finished was that Final Fantasy Rebirth or whatever, and that was a lot of fun. But those games are so long. 60 hours, 70 hours.
I think the last game that was a brand new game to me at the time that I actually finished was Red Dead 2.
That game's long.
I spent hundreds of hours. I didn't even get 100% completion. I mean, I think I was at 88 or 89 maybe. And since then, like I restarted Last of Us before the first season of the show came out. I didn't finish it, but I'd been there, done that anyway. Yeah, I started the Assassin's Creed Vikings one, which I'm pretty sure it was panned. So I don't think I'm the only one who was like bleh about it. I didn't get very far into it. Like I've played other games. I've played a little bit of Helldivers. I'm terrible at it, but also that's not a game that you can like finish, right? It's not that type of game. So, but yeah, I haven't really been playing games at all. I re-upped my PlayStation Online subscription late last summer after the Red Dead convention in South Dakota. And I played a few times with some of the people I met there. And they're great and everything. It's just being on the West Coast, they're all on the East Coast. So the timing just never works out or very, very rarely works out where they're playing and I'm actually available. And the extent of my game playing right now is this stupid fucking game I've been playing on my phone for like a year or a little bit less now. And it's one of those dumbass matching games. It's called Travel Town. And the whole thing is about trying to get you, like, they're just trying to get you to spend money. And my whole thing is I'm not fucking spending money on this game. So it's maddening and I hate it, but it's also that and Solitaire. I have a version of Solitaire on my phone. And when I'm just like needing to zone out, I play these stupid phone games. To be honest, most of what I do lately is reading. Lots and lots of reading.
What are you reading?
Lately, I have been just absolutely devouring books that are either about or based in New Orleans. There's not any point in listing all of them because I've read like 14 books so far this year, and 5, 6, 7 of them or so have been in this New Orleans category. But I do want to mention 2 of them because so far the best one was 9 Lives by Dan Baum. He is now I'm blanking. He's either New York Times Times or New Yorker writer. I want to say it's the Times. It's something from New York. I'm pretty sure it's the Times or the New Yorker, but he went down to New Orleans, I want to say after Katrina, and like collected stories from people. But these are people who had lived in New Orleans for like decades for the most part. It's an extremely well put together story about these 9 very interesting people. It's very moving. It's very good. It's sad, but uplifting in the end. I literally couldn't put it down, which I think is not all that easy to say a lot of the time with true life, true tale sort of books.
Yeah.
It's all interviews that he did that he put together into these stories, but Chef's Kiss, he's written about several other, not disasters even necessarily, but he's written several other books on worldly topics or like US specific topics. I already have a couple of his other books on my list because he is that good of a writer that it's like things I'm tangentially interested in, but reading this might get me more interested. So the other one I wanted to mention, it's this book called The Casket Girls by Alice Arden. And apparently this book, do you know what Wattpad is?
No, I don't think so.
Weirdly enough, I actually went to the Wattpad launch party at Comic-Con, I think I want to say it was San Diego Comic-Con 2015. I thought it was like a fan fiction site at the time. And I don't know if maybe I am misremembering because obviously this is like almost 10 years ago or if it changed over time. But now apparently most people who use it to write their own fiction and release it piece by piece and garner interest and I think hopes of getting like publishing deals and stuff, or maybe just to put their writing out there. Either way, it doesn't matter. But this person, Alice Arden, she started this book, The Casket Girls, on Wattpad and eventually got a publishing deal with, I think it's more of like a smaller publisher, maybe not quite indie, but to be honest, if you had handed me this book 15 years ago, I would have been like, nah. It's got a vampire element, and I was very anti-vampire for a long time because of Twilight.
As were we all.
Yeah. So to the point where I even tried reading Interview with a Vampire, and I was like, no, I can't with the vampires, but I'm over that now. And the vampires, while they're an element of it, it is a really good story about a post-storm New Orleans. She never names the storm. She changed the dates of the storm, but it's obvious what it's supposed to evoke, and not in a bad way at all. It's not like the best written book. Some of the things, the main character randomly goes in and out of French in both conversations and thoughts, which it's a bit of a storytelling device on the author's part, but I know a good amount of French. So it wasn't like I couldn't understand it, but it just felt kind of weird and forced a lot of the time. The point being, like, it's a really different book that I wasn't quite expecting it to be what it was. And I also liked the, more intimate descriptions of New Orleans from a fictional standpoint, because it's all real. Like the places she's talking about, there are names changed and stuff, but they're based on very real places. And it was a very interesting book. It's a 4-book series. So I already went and bought the second one and actually just started it last night. So,
nice.
So those are even though I've read a bazillion, I've read 14, 15 books this year, but that's a bazillion.
I haven't read 14 books in 20 years. Okay. So
to be fair, at least 3 of them were audiobooks. But I count that as reading.
I guess I've done some audiobooks actually when I think about it, but it's still not 14. I really want to go to New Orleans because I've always wanted to write a screenplay, like a noir detective story that takes place in New Orleans. I feel like they always take place in like California in the 40s. They always take place in like New York. And it's like, I want to do it in Louisiana instead.
Have you seen, now that obviously this is not New Orleans, but have you seen the first season of True Detective?
No.
You should watch it. It's not New Orleans, but it is like Louisiana. So have you been reading at all?
No, I'm just kidding. So I picked up this book that I had read, man, I don't know when it was, 97, I think, 96 or 97. It's when I first started having panic attacks. This was like right before I got into like doing martial arts and stuff. This girl I was dating at the time, I was kind of talking to her and she says, you should really get into Taoism. And I was like, well, what the hell is that? I've never heard of that before. I heard of Buddhism and I heard of Taoism before. And she's like, no, like your entire personality, the way you look at life, you're like a Taoist, but you just don't realize it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So there's this book that was called The Tao of Pooh, and that's Winnie the Pooh, not like poo poo. And it kind of explains Taoism.
I mean, to be honest, in a way, I understand why it's the Tao of Winnie the Pooh, but also the idea of the Tao of Poo Poo.
Yeah, Tao of Pooh. Like, that's great. So what is this book? Is this like a toilet book? Like when I sit down on the toilet? So it's cool because it uses kind of the characters of Winnie the Pooh to kind of describe different aspects of Taoism and kind of explains it in very much layman's term for like anyone to, I lack a certain level of understanding when it comes. So like if you get into Taoism, there's the Tao Te Ching, which is kind of like their poetry book. That's the is all be all of Taoism. And I'll be honest with you, I read it right over my head, man. When you start getting into this kind of weird ethereal concept like of poetry and all this kind of stuff, dude, I'm more designed like a robot. I need ones and zeros, not so much that kind of stuff. That stuff is great, and if people can absorb it, it's fantastic. I just lack that sense of being able to absorb stuff like that. So I need it more broken down, like in kind of layman's terms, when it comes to concepts that are like spiritual and stuff like that. We can turn metaphors around until we're blue in the face, but in the end, it's like, well, what the fuck does it mean? You know, like it's just a bunch of fucking metaphors. It can mean anything. And it's supposed to be, well, you know, it's how you see it. Okay, well, I don't need to read a poem to let you know how I feel. I feel like shit. But I mean, it is cool and very respectful because it is an interesting read. I will say that it's a very interesting read and it's very good. And if you're into those kind of things, then I just hope that you can kind of digest it better than I did. So this book just breaks it down in layman's terms and it makes me feel good. Even if you're not a spiritual person or anything like that, it's a fascinating read. It's very renowned in that circle. Definitely check it out.
Have you ever seen the movie The Tao of Steve?
No, I've heard of it, but I have not seen it. No.
This guy I was with for a long time, he made me watch this movie when we were like dating. And it is a decent movie, but like sitting me down and making me watch this movie to make it clear that he's not looking for anything serious is the way I'm pretty sure it was meant to be, why he was doing it, whatever. Because it's about this, he's supposed to not be very physically attractive. He's like a kindergarten teacher, you know, so he's not a bad person or anything like that, but he has this whole seduction thing that he calls, I don't even think his name is Steve. I think he like adopted this from some previous dude he'd met or whatever. But I looked it up because I wanted to, I was like, what were his stupid rules? Be desireless, be excellent, be gone. And it's just, you know, the whole movie is about him meeting somebody who makes him rethink his stupid seduction plan. It's a pretty decent movie for what it is. To be fair, it's probably been 22 or 23 years. 21, 22 years since I watched it. So now I'm kind of thinking, do I need to watch this again and like see how absolutely bad it might be? I don't know if it totally fits into 90s and naughties cringe factor, but if I rewatch it and I decide that it does, maybe we'll do a 90s and naughties episode on it because it is a 2000 movie. So,
well, there you go. I'd be down for it for sure.
It's not a teen movie, but listen, we blew that out of the water with Love Actually, and that's fine anyway.
Yeah, we did because that was a ride.
So speaking of watching things, though, what have you been watching lately? I need you to say what you've been watching because I'm...
Yeah. So for many years since this show came out, everyone kept telling me to watch it. Well, you got to watch this show. You got to watch the show. And I never did because I was so done with the superhero stuff after Endgame. So people are like, no, that's totally fine. Just watch this. Don't worry. Don't think about those things. Watch this. So I started watching The Boys. Holy shit. I didn't know. I mean, I kind of knew what I was walking into, but I did not know what I was walking into. And I was like, holy shit. This is actually a really fucking good show. This is probably what Marvel would be like if it was real. This is what I feel superheroes would actually be in real life. And especially now, like, you know, I'm in season 2. I just finished season 2. You can tell maybe who was in office when they wrote this.
Just keep going.
Yeah, it was very like anti-immigrant, like, oh my gosh, like all this stuff. And it was like, okay, dude, I see what you're doing here. And it's like, you know, the real life Superman, right? Homelander. And he's just like, yeah, America and everything, you know, but the writing is really good on it. I hate most of the characters on it because they have so many of these like flaws. I mean, he's supposed to be the anti-hero, Billy the Butcher, but probably him and then the other kid, I can't remember what his name is, are like the most redeeming characters in it. I guess actually their whole group is actually the redeeming characters. They're like the anti-heroes, they're the criminals, they're fighting against
quote
the like
unquote
superheroes, quote unquote, but they're actually the most redeeming characters, you know, aside from like Starlight. But yeah, and it's really off the wall. And when you see like how it's marketed, it's just wild, right? Because there was this comic called The Ultimates, I think back in like 2000, that was based off Marvel and stuff like that. It's where you get Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, right? And they were talking about ways of how they can make money to raise money for S.H.I.E.L.D. And they're like, well, we should make movies is what we should do. So in this, you're totally seeing this kind of coming to like fruition. The people who wrote this definitely did their homework because there is a lot of things in it that I'm like, wow, like that's really smart. I totally see what you did there.
Well, it's based on a comic series.
Yeah, it's a wild ride. It's extremely grotesque.
Oh,
You know,
so
it
it's
is
so gross.
so bad. And it's just like, dude. But I mean, honestly, I'm not one for like gross stuff, but I think it
Mm-mm.
goes with it because it's like, look,
Yeah.
we watch Marvel and all this stuff. When somebody hits somebody in one of those movies, it's like, oh, they fell down. It's like, no, let's call it for what it actually is. Like,
Yeah.
if Thor hits you with his hammer, it's going through you.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's going to probably rip you in pieces. And this is the show that's kind of like, well, let's show you what that would actually look like if someone did that. It's very much very over the top. And they had introduced this character. I can remember her name now. And it turns out that she was kind of like the Captain America version of Nazi Germany.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I knew something was up with her before they said it because she had opened this box at one point and I saw the knife in there and I was like, oh no. Oh no. Yeah. And then she's the one who's influencing Homelander to be like, no, it's about security of this country and this nation and da 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 da. And it was just like, and then she starts talking about, no, it's white genocide. I was like, oh my God, here we go.
Stormfront.
Stormfront. Yeah.
Which even sounds.
Yeah, you know, and the actress is fantastic. She plays the part so good. I mean, everybody who's in it does a fantastic fucking job.
Yeah. No, agree.
But very high production. I haven't been bored. I'm in season 2. I've just finished season 2 and I haven't been bored at all yet. It's just been like exciting. But as much as I hate 8-episode seasons, you know, because we always complained about that with House of the Dragon and stuff like that, right? This is a show where it actually works for it.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it really works for it because they're really tight on the writing that it just takes 8 episodes to kind of get through it, which is really great. If this show was 20 episodes long, I can see how it would drag out and it probably wouldn't be that great.
There's been 4 seasons released so far, and the 5th season is going to be released mid 2026, which is a bit long, but weirdly enough, I wasn't even press at San Diego Comic-Con in 2019. And this was before the first season ever came out. I ended up in the press room because I was still helping with the geekiary a lot at that time. And the person who was supposed to do it ended up feeling very ill that day. So I went to the press room for them and I had no idea what it was. To be honest, it was kind of early in the morning and I was hungover as shit. So I just put my phone up and like recorded the whole thing, just zoned out the whole time. I don't think I've ever rewatched the recording that I took. I sent it to them. I know they either put it on the geekiary YouTube and or possibly did like a transcript and put that on the website. I don't remember. It's been so long. But when the show came out, I was like, oh shit, I did the classroom for this. Like sort of. I mean, I did it as in like I showed up, I sat there and I took a recording. But yeah, so and also was it Gen V? There's like a spin-off.
There's a spin-off.
That's pretty good too.
Yeah, I heard it was good.
You got a good amount of this to
I did
watch.
good, right? Because when you were talking about video games, you're talking about the Last of Us. I actually played The Last of Us 2 or 3 weeks before the second one.
Oh, really? Okay.
So everybody was, because the thing is I don't like zombie stuff. You know, I'm not into it unless it's 28 days later type of zombie situation or like, I don't know, but I was not going to get into it. My brother had been pushing me since like 2013 or whenever that game came out. Like 10 years. Oh my God,
yeah.
And I was just like, nah. And finally I sat down to play it. And it was such a well done video game.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so good. And I thought since you had Ellie with you, it was going to be this. One thing I hate in video games is I hate escort missions on any level. Airplanes, people, like I don't want to do that. But Ellie was the first time in a video game that they actually helped you. And it was like actually beneficial to have them there. And it was fantastic. And then I played the second one and the story fell apart and I fucking hated it. So
I heard about the ending to the second one before maybe not before it came out, but very, very soon after it came out. And I was like, I'm just going to skip. I never even started playing the second one.
No, I played 5 or 6 hours of it and where the story was going, it was just, I don't know. The gameplay was phenomenal. Like it was great, but honestly, I don't feel like they needed to wait that long to release that game. And that's probably where a lot of the problems came in, why people just kind of revolted against it. If they would have released that game as just kind of like an expansion and just did it maybe a year or 2 after the game came out, and then people go, oh, well, I didn't like that story. It sucked, but let's see what they do next. But when you have them waiting almost 10 years or 8 years, however long it was, and then you give them this game and then everyone hates it, no one wants to see what happens next. They're just like, no, they've given up. it's fan fiction at that point, right? To everybody. It's like, that's just fan fiction. That's not how the story ended in my head.
Well, I mean, and the first season of the show is so good. And it's funny, like, I know that it's technically zombie media, but like it feels so different because they're not, are they zombies really? Like the cordyceps and everything? I don't know. But, and I
Well,
mean,
you know what it's like, Battlestar, right? Like Battlestar is not a sci-fi show. It's a drama that happens to take place in space. And I feel like The Last of Us is the same thing. It's a drama that happens to take place in a zombie infected world.
Even though I know technically they're referred to and everything as zombies, they're very different. It's like they're not Romero zombies. They're not even Walking Dead walkers zombies. Walker zombies. Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to talk about like the currently releasing shows that I'm watching. I'm not going to go into detail about any of these. I'm just going to list them. Daredevil, the new Daredevil. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. We'll see what happens. Invincible. Have you seen Invincible?
I don't think so. No.
Invincible is a superhero, animated superhero show from Robert Kirkman, who did Walking Dead. It's really good. It is very gory. It's animated, but it's closer to The Boys than it is to, if you're liking The Boys and you have Prime, definitely watch Invincible. I don't know if this week's episode was the season finale or not. It felt like it. I think it was. I'm a little bit about it if it was the season finale because they were like, here's 10 more villains. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but also not super hyperbolic when I say here's 10 more villains. Reacher, which is whatever. It's a show I watch. It's fun to watch. I mean, fun is probably not the best word because people die and stuff, but
it's entertaining. It's just entertainment.
Yeah, it's just entertainment. Okay, Severance. I got a new iPhone last fall, and with it came 3 free months of Apple Plus. And I was like, well, fine, whatever. I was supposed to cancel Apple Plus last month. I didn't. I had a reminder in my phone and everything. And I was like, I can't. Because I bothered even signing up for the Apple Plus thing because I wanted to watch the new season of Silo, which also a good show. But that ended up maybe a month ago. I don't know. It's been a bit. And even while that was still airing, I was like looking for other shows. So I watched Shrinking. And then I've already seen other Apple Plus shows as well, including For All Mankind. Fucking amazing. And also Ted Lasso, one of my favorite shows ever. So I'd seen other Apple Plus shows one way or another over the years, but I watched Shrinking because it literally, we have been watching Silo and Shrinking, just the first episode of Shrinking just like started. It does that automatic start thing. Like it just picks a show for you. And I was like, okay. And Shrinking's actually good too. But anyway, so it did that after I finished Shrinking or something at some point, it shoved me into Severance. And I was like, well, I feel like I've heard about this. My biggest complaint about Severance is once I watched the first season and realized that I finished watching the first season about 2 weeks before the second season came out, I looked up when the first season came out and it was 3 fucking years ago. So I'm like, oh God, when this season ends, I'm going to be so pissed if I have to wait 3 years to find out answers to some of these questions or whatever. But yeah, it's very good. So I would say it's probably the best sci-fi mystery show on TV right now. Even though From isn't currently airing, I would say that's the best horror mystery. So Severance, best sci-fi mystery show. From, which is on MGM Plus or some bullshit. I don't fucking know. That one is the best horror mystery show. There's a lot of people from Lost involved in it. So we're just crossing our fingers that it's not going to be the next Lost in terms of endings. But anyway, so Severance is amazing. This season has had its ups and downs episode wise, but I'm still very much enjoying it. Have you seen Yellow Jackets?
No, I've seen a lot of the commercials for it.
Yeah, it's good. It's another like horror mystery show, but I'm like 1 or 2 episodes behind on that. So like I'm watching it, but not as fast as I'm watching things that I have immediate access to. I haven't had time to pick up season 2 of 1923, which is one of the Yellowstone prequels, but I know there's like 3 episodes out and I think maybe the 4th one is coming out this weekend. So I'm like, I gotta get my shit together and start watching this season. That's like on my list. So I'm sure when we do this next month, I will have more Yellow Jackets and 1923 talk. But one thing I wanted to touch on. So have you seen Only Murders in the Building? That's Hulu, I believe. So it kept getting suggested to me. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch Only Murders in the Building. So I did. And it's great. I fucking love it. I love this idea of like a found family where it's this elder, not like younger millennial. I think is Selena Gomez is supposed to be like younger millennial girl with like these 2 much older dudes. But they all like true crime podcasts. So that's how they become friends. And it's cute how they become friends. I mean, the murders, not so cute, but it's a really good show. So that put me on maybe a little bit of a true crime kick because then I started getting suggested other things and
Mhm.
I started watching some documentaries. And yeah, I don't know. There was one that I watched that I don't remember this happening because I feel like it's because I wasn't on, even though I was on Instagram in like mid 2016, I wasn't like on it a lot. But there
Mhm.
was this Australian, essentially like early age influencer on Instagram. She was like a health influencer or something. I don't know. She had an app. Like she started a health food app and she was claiming that she had brain cancer and that eating healthy and shit had like had kept her in
Mm.
remission or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I think I'll get into more about this in our next episode, or I might actually do one of my solo podcasts about it. It's a lot of stuff I want to talk about, but there's a dramatization of it on Netflix called Apple Cider Vinegar. But I
Mhm.
also watched the documentary, which was something like the search for Instagram's biggest liar, biggest fraud
Mhm.
or something like that. It's a really interesting take on a person who had some very serious mental health issues and
Yeah.
used them to fool a fuck ton of people and has
Yeah.
now like disappeared from like, I don't know if anybody even knows where she is now. But yeah, the apple cider vinegar show is interesting, but the documentary is also like, ooh, how did this girl get away with this for so long? Like nobody was questioning her whole shtick at all. Like I guess back in 2015, you could just get on Instagram and be like, I cured my brain cancer with green beans and everybody believed you. It was like stage 4. Anyway, whatever. Have you been watching anything else other than The Boys or just kind of?
No, so it's pretty much because I get very hyper focused. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
if there's a show that I start watching and I start liking, I just watch it at full throttle. But I won't watch any shows brand new that have more than 4 seasons. Like I won't
Mm-hmm.
sit down right now and start watching a show that has 15 seasons to it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like a bit much.
I mean, what shows have 15 seasons anymore either, though? Let's be real.
Yeah, it's not a lot of them. I mean, there was what is it, Supernatural or whatever I think had
Oh, God. Yeah.
a bunch of ones, but
Yeah.
but that's like CW stuff. And in all honesty,
Yeah.
I can't watch CW stuff, but whatever. My bad, I guess.
To each their own. Some people
To
can
each
do it,
their
some
own,
people
man.
can't.
Yeah, I just can't. I think the last CW show I watched was Roswell, and that was like the first rendition of
Oh,
Roswell back in the
man.
day.
Yep.
Yeah,
Same. I loved that
yeah.
show.
I loved it. It was
That
great.
and
It was so good.
X-Files, man.
Yeah,
That was my
it was
shit in
great.
high school.
Oh, yeah, I loved it.
Now I kind of like, should I rewatch Roswell? Wasn't there, how many seasons of that were there?
There was only like 2 seasons or
That's what I
something, right?
thought.
It
Yeah.
was like short. There wasn't a lot to it, but it was really good. It was short and sweet. I like shows like that are just kind of like said and done pretty quickly.
I mean, listen, you say like you get hyper focused. Listen, you're talking to the person who watched all of True Blood, rewatched it immediately, then read all of the books, and then started listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
And honestly, now it's one of those shows that sometimes I just put it on in the background because sometimes you just need to watch really hot people having sex, not porn wise. Listen, I
Yeah.
could watch Alexander Skarsgård all day, every day. It's not just that though. It's also like I love listening to the main couple for the first several seasons is Bill and
Mhm.
Sookie and just laughing every time Bill says Sookie's name because he says Sookie.
Sookie.
Yeah, exactly. You're better at it than I am. You would- Yeah, I get the hyper focus thing.
Aside from that, man, it's really just like I watch like YouTube videos, like techie YouTube videos and stuff like that. I'll put on Star Trek if I'm like drawing and stuff like that. That's just like background stuff that I put
Mhm.
on. That's
Yeah.
what I consider like my comfort food of watching.
Yeah.
It's like I've already seen this stuff. I love it. And I put it on in the background so I can feel comforted. That's it. But it's really hard for me to sit down and watch anything. I have such a minimal amount of time during the nighttime that it's like, okay, I want to try to focus on doing some creative stuff or writing or doing something that it's like it's hard for me to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch this show. Like it has to really be something
Mhm.
crazy to like reel me in, which is like what The Boys did. The Boys like right off the bat just reeled me in, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm not being productive this week.
Even if it's a new show that I'm super into, I would say 80% of the time doing something else, working on graphics for the show and stuff. Writing, not so much because I do have to like concentrate a little more when I'm actually writing, but
Mhm.
yeah, playing stupid games on my phone, whatever. I need to keep my hands busy, I think is the biggest issue.
I get that.
Okay, so last but not least, news or general gossip stuff. And this is our first time doing this. So, like, I haven't really, and I don't want to actually define what this is, this news.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it can be, have you seen something? And I don't mean serious news, I mean like pop culture stuff, right? Have you seen something that's coming out soon that you're excited about? Have you seen something that, I don't know, that's coming out soon that you're not excited about? Because I got one of those. Just, you know, what's going on in your life? Do you have something going on in your life that's like fun that you want to talk about? Because we're doing this mainly for patrons, whether people are at the level where they're watching it live or whether they're watching the recorded version a little bit later, etc. I don't know. Obviously not too personal because it will, at least this episode is going to go public eventually. But you know.
No, man, I'm trying to think. Pop culture stuff. I heard they're making a new Star Trek show and I fucking hate it. It's like Star Trek Academy or whatever, Starfleet Academy. And it's like, that's fine because I know that they've wanted to do that for many, many, many of years since the first series. Gene Roddenberry wanted to do that. So now they're going to do it, but it's based in the Star Trek Discovery universe. And like, I'm sorry, I know a lot of people liked it, and that's great. If you liked it, boo boo, then keep watching it. Don't listen to me. Just fast forward till the end. But I fucking hated that show, dude.
Discovery. Dean didn't like it either.
I didn't fucking like it. And everyone's like, oh, you should watch Strange New Worlds. I'm like, look, dude, it's
Strange New Worlds is really good, though. I say
like,
this.
I tried.
Okay. I mean, hey, you don't have to like it. Like, I will say, like, I say this as not a Star Trek fan. You know, I'm not big into Star Trek, but I liked Strange New Worlds a lot.
I just feel that the one thing that was, you can make the things look beautiful, you can do all of the special effects, but when you take the nuance out of the story, man, which is what they did, I just don't care. It looks pretty. That's great. Hey, you can go pick up a Lamborghini, right? Lamborghinis, they look beautiful on the outside, but in the end, they're just garbage vehicles. And they're going to break down in a few months and you're going to be paying half the price you paid for it just to get it fixed. They look nice and they're impressive, but in the end, they're just garbage vehicles. When I see these newer shows, it's like, you guys are missing the point. Like if you're trying to make Star Trek all action and explosions and look at all this, you've missed the fucking point. You completely missed the fucking point. So yeah, when that one came out, I went like on a rant about it. It doesn't matter. Like, look, if somebody, like, I'm not losing any money on it. Okay. Like, let's just face facts. I'm not losing any money on it.
Yeah.
If somebody likes it and it's coming out great, I'm glad that they're making something for you. Maybe they'll make something for me one day, you know, or maybe the Orville will come back and I'll just keep my mouth shut because I liked the Orville. So the Orville was done with nuance. The way the old stuff was filmed, it was done perfectly. That was
I love
great.
the Orville.
Yeah, it was a great substitute show for what I was missing. It was fantastic.
Not exactly on the same line, but close enough. Anyone who knows me at all, literally at all, knows that I am a huge Jurassic Park fan. It's the first live action movie I remember seeing in theaters. The first movie I remember seeing in theaters was Oliver and Company. Not to date myself or anything. I might have been to movies before that. That's just the first one I remember seeing. Which, God, when did Oliver and Company come out? I'm looking it up. 1988. Jesus Christ, I was 6. How do I remember that? Anyway, I am a huge Jurassic Park fan. To the point where after I saw the movie, we were at the supermarket and the book was in like the supermarket checkout line. Remember back when they used to have books in the supermarket checkout line? I begged my mom to buy it for me. She was like, this is really adult, Tara. You're like 9. And I was like, oh, please. And I took that book home and I read it, and I still have that same fucking copy that I got at the supermarket in 1992. And I have read it. I don't even know how. I've read Jurassic Park probably 10 times at least. Anyway, so love Jurassic Park. I will absolutely go to see Jurassic World Rebirth in the theater when it comes out in whatever, May or June or whatever. Seeing these Jurassic movies in the theater is not a streak I am willing to break. I've seen all of them in the theater, but even I am in enough is enough mode at this point. Like, I will still see it because I'm not going to break that streak. But like this newest one, I thought I don't even remember what the last one was called. I've got Jurassic World Dominion. I've got the popcorn bucket right behind my head here. That was supposed to be the end of it, I thought. And now we've got Scarlett fucking Johansson for some reason in what is essentially like a loose reboot of The Lost World. In The Lost World, there was the photographer who went to study the dinosaurs. And in this one, they're going for like medical reasons for some reason, but I don't even know what island they're going back to. I can't remember if it's Isla Nublar or if it's the actual Lost World. Regardless, it's just a somewhat slightly different variation on the Lost World story. And I'm just like, I kind of just hope it bombs so that they stop. And I hate to say that because I love me some Jurassic Park, but at some point it just needs to stop. right?
I feel like they're just recycling so much shit
Mhm.
now because they're trying to guarantee money, is what it is, you know? And they keep making these same movies and they keep making these same movies. And it's like, dude, experiment to make something different. I thought that after the superhero stuff was dying, that we were going to go into this cyberpunk avenue when, like, the same time period when Blade Runner was coming out, because they always kind of went hand in hand like that. So I'm like, okay, now we're going to experience this thing. And I was very hopeful with that when they did the Battle Angel Alita. I was like, okay, cool, because that was superhero-y, but it's very cyberpunk also, you
Mhm.
know? So I was like, oh, this is cool. Maybe this is an avenue that'll kind of grow into something different. No, we just went right back to it. They're just recycling garbage and recycling. Not that it's garbage. I mean, look, it's Jurassic Park. I'm sure it's going to be enjoyable to like some extent, right? I didn't watch like
To
the
some
last two
extent.
or three, but the last one I watched, it was the newer one, and I can't remember. It had Bryce Dallas Howard in it.
Well,
And
yeah, that's all. So there's Jurassic World, which was
Mhm.
the first Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard one. And then there's
that was the one I watched.
oh, what was the second
It was
one?
like Lost Kingdom or something.
Yes, that was the second one where because of what happened in Jurassic World, they had to abandon that island. But now there's a volcano that's going to destroy the whole island and all the dinosaurs. So they go back to save the dinosaurs. Is that what it is? I think that's that's Lost Kingdom, because Jeff Goldblum had like a very brief cameo in it where he's in front of the court saying, "Please let's not. Don't bring these dinosaurs to the mainland," I think is what he was saying. And then the most recent one, Jurassic World Dominion, it brought back Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler. And like, listen, that's why I loved it. You are smacking me in the face with like a fucking rubber nostalgia dildo. But I
Yeah,
fucking loved it.
look,
It was not a good movie,
yeah,
but
but
I
they do
loved it.
things like that. Yeah. In the Jurassic World, or when they did that one, there's a scene where the, you know, I guess it's like the T-Rex, or I don't know which, look, the big dinosaur that was the
Hmm.
one from like part one, that same dinosaur, where it was kind of mimicking some scenes from the original one. And it was
Mhm,
fighting
mhm.
the other dinosaur. And it was so exciting because you're like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the dinosaur I watched when I was a kid, and it's kicking this new one's ass.
Well,
I
and then
love it.
also like the velociraptors come in and like team up with the T-Rex.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
But that's okay because it's entertaining, right? That's like,
And it's
look, no
against the
one.
bigger bad dinosaur.
Exactly. It's like no one went in there for realism. Okay. We were going in there because we wanted to see dinosaurs box it out, you know,
Yeah.
like that's it. And I was 100% down with that. That's why I liked, like, I didn't get to watch the movies, but when they did the King Kong movie and then they did the Godzilla one, and then they're like, oh, now they're creating their own monster verse and they were fighting each other. Like, I was like, okay, this is fucking kind of cool. This is like some classic. No one's watching this for realism or like actual meat of the story. It's just, I want to see fucking Godzilla fight fucking King Kong.
The first Jurassic Park was perfect.
Yeah, you can't beat that one.
Yeah, I will never, you know, that the meme where it's like the guy sitting at the table and it's like, change my mind. I would never even do that because nobody's ever going to fucking, well, to be
You
fair,
never-
usually when I post that meme, I'm joking and nobody's ever going to change my mind about the thing I'm putting on that table. But I had one more thing I was going to mention, but I think we're a little over an hour and I want to try to keep these about this length. It's not timely. I'm going to save it for next time. One thing I wanted to say, it's not going to make a lot of sense if people haven't watched our recent Media That Made Us Battlestar episodes, but I'm toying around with the idea of calling people who are fans of the Geek Saga show some sort of hot dog term.
Hot
Like,
dog.
it doesn't have to be the word hot dog, but I feel like this show is sort of like a hot dog. There's a common ingredient. In the hot dog case, it should be beef or pork, depending on your kosher preferences. But if you're not eating a kosher hot dog that's all beef, you're eating a hot dog that is made of who knows what, but it is all from the same animal. And that's why I was like, wouldn't it be funny to just, I want to think about that for our
Let's simmer
next
on that,
State of the
yes.
Saga episode.
Because you know I'm all about immortalizing my boy hot dog.
Yeah. And also like I'm thinking about like other terms for hot dogs, and I'm like, obviously we're not gonna go with like wieners. Okay. And Frankfurter sounds weird. Franks, that could be funny.
Franks. That could be
Franks
funny.
could be funny, but it's always all going to come back to hot dog. And for those of you who have not watched our, well, if you haven't watched Battlestar ever, you're obviously not watching or listening to our Battlestar episodes. But there's
Yeah.
a character in Battlestar, for those of you who don't know, whose name is Hot Dog, and he has just somehow become an emblem of those episodes. So this is why that's something we're gonna simmer on, like Manny said,
Yes.
and think about and come up with a fun name for a Geek Saga show fan.
And it's not like an insult.
No, it's not at all, at
You
all.
can listen to me rant on that. I love hot dog. You know?
Well, to be fair, I think some people who are huge BSG fans might think it's an insult, but we do not at all mean it that way, because also, like, as much as the complaints I've heard about that character are usually about like, oh, that guy can't act or whatever, but the character itself is just very nonchalant. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this big bad thing is happening. Well, guess we're doing this now.
If you decide to become a fan, I will go up to you and be like, "You're hot dog. Your name is hot dog." Okay, all Kara Thrace style, you know.
Oh man. Okay. Anybody watching or listening, tune in, because there's still stuff we didn't get to for timing purposes. As we close out this episode, once again, want to give a huge thanks to our patrons for their support. Make sure to check out our other Geek Saga show series, including Media That Made Us, which we just mentioned, which is currently covering Battlestar Galactica, the 90s and Naughties Cringe Factor, the Impulsive Hyperfocus solo episodes that I do, and more. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, or rate us 5 stars wherever you're watching or listening. And as always, consider supporting us by backing our Patreon if you don't already at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment.